Blue circle.
I'm used to a red X.
Good. Ready? Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today in beautiful but slightly rainy Squamish. Excuse the frog in my thrumish. Excuse the frog in my throat. It's a casualty of having been on the doorsteps talking to voters for the last 4 weeks. My name's Yuri Fulmer. I'm running as the BC Conservative candidate in West Van Cedar Sky. It's my great pleasure to stand before you today and introduce you to a man who's been fighting for British Columbians for over 2 decades. John Rustad is the leader of the Conservative Party of British Columbia and the person who has given the people of our province hope after the radical ideology of the NDP has put drugs on our street, crippled our economy, and caused our cost of living to skyrocket. Born and raised in Prince George, John has spent more than 20 years working in BC's forestry industry. Frustrated with the direction of the province, he then decided to stand up and fight by running as an MLA in 2005. Then, as Minister of Aboriginal Relations and Reconciliation, John signed 435 agreements with First Nations, more than any other Canadian politician in modern history. After becoming an independent MLA, he then joined the Conservative Party of BC because he realized he must continue to fight and he can't do it alone. I'm thrilled to be part of the team helping him to fight with him, and I know you're all on our side. So without further ado, please help me welcome the man who's brought hope back to British Columbia and our next Premier, John Rustad.
Thanks everybody for coming out today on a beautiful British Columbia fall day. The rain shine is exactly what we would expect from a rainforest in British Columbia. But it's nice to be able to be in Squamish to do this announcement today. British Columbia relies on many things, and I think British Columbians need many things. They need a place to live, they need food, and they need energy. And they need to make sure that those 3 things are as affordable as possible and that are provided as reliably as possible by a government. We came out and talked about how we're going to fix the housing and how we're going to address affordability for people in British Columbia associated with that. Last week we also talked about our food and how we need to make sure that we're doubling food production and so that we have food security. And today I'm here to talk about our energy and what we need for our future in British Columbia. When we think about energy in British Columbia, the key in my mind is we should have energy independence. We should not be relying on other jurisdictions to meet the energy needs we have in British Columbia. We have all the potential we could ever want, but unfortunately, like most things, it is not being managed well. As a matter of fact, it's being hopelessly managed on many fronts. For example, last year alone, British Columbia was required to import almost 20% of the electricity that we needed from other jurisdictions. That's electricity that's coming in from coal fire or natural gas fire from other jurisdictions. People in this province should not be vulnerable. People in this province should be able to have the energy we need to be able to carry on with their day-to-day lives. We also need to make sure that energy is affordable. It's an important component of what we want to be able to do. And so as part of our goal and our objective as the Conservative Party of British Columbia is it is time we have a conversation in British Columbia about our energy and our energy mix. It's time we have an open and honest conversation about how we meet our needs, not just of today, but of tomorrow. We are going to need significant additional energy generation in British Columbia. It's a simple fact. We do not have enough to meet the demands that we have, and certainly the demands going forward. We need to be realistic about what we create as a province in terms of those demands. Today, for example, with this NDP government's approach to saying that they want every household to have a heat pump or that everybody needs to have an electric vehicle, we do not have the electrical generation to be able to do this. We do not have the delivery, the grid, to be able to deliver that electricity to neighborhoods across the province. And that's why, from our perspective, we need to restore energy independence in this province. We need to make sure that we have the energy that we need and that we have policies in place that are going to build out that energy to meet our growing demands. So eliminating the mandates that this government has put in place is one step, but it's not a step just unto itself. It's a step that says we need to make sure we have the energy generation and make sure that we actually are not doing what the NDP is doing, which is putting the cart before the horse in terms of the process. So energy, eliminating the mandates for things like electric vehicles and heat pumps is something that we will be doing in the province. We need to make sure that as part of this, like I say, we need to have this honest conversation with people in British Columbia. What is our power mix going to be? Should we be using nuclear power in British Columbia? Where is that? Where are we going to meet those future demands? If you think about, just for example, if every household and business in this province was required to have a heat pump, we would need to build out the equivalent of 6 or 7 more Site C dams. And we're likely not going to be building another major dam in British Columbia. So where is that power going to come from? We recognize that wind and solar needs to be part of that mix. It's an important piece, but it's not baseload and it is not reliable. So we need to be able to have those sources going forward. So we want to make sure that the people in this province have an opportunity to have this conversation, that it isn't just thrust upon them, but they are going to be able to make decisions in terms of what our energy mix needs to be. And for this reason, for example, up in the northwest of British Columbia, we announced last week that rather than building a $5 billion power line from the northeast to the northwest, we'll look at using local power generation in the northwest. It's a way to make sure that we have reliable power for that region of the province. And it's also a way to make sure that we drive down the delivery charge costs for people that use things like natural gas for heating. We want to make sure that we have an honest conversation about nuclear power in this province. What does it mean? How do we do it? What do we do? How do we deal with this associated with the seismic issues that we have in this province? Can this be done affordably? Can it be done reliably? Can it be done safely? We need to make sure we answer all these questions. How are we going to be meeting that future need? What does it mean for ratepayers? And that's the most important thing, because right now, ratepayers are on the hook for whatever decisions government's making, and they're not part of that decision. They're just having to live with it. Our electricity rates are one of the most important things we have in British Columbia, and one of our economic advantages we have in this province. What the decisions that we need to make sure, how are we making sure we maintain that competitive advantage? How are we making sure that people have the power and that it is affordable? It's a big piece of the conversation that's needed, and it's what makes sense from a common sense perspective in terms of what we'll deliver in British Columbia. We're at a crossroads, really, when you think about British Columbia and where we're going. David Eby and his government removed the requirement that was in the legislation to actually be energy independent. They seem to think it's okay to be relying on other jurisdictions. I couldn't disagree more. We have all the potential that we could ever want in this province. We need to be able to make sure that we are self-sufficient. We need to make sure that we're meeting our needs. Big piece of that, of course, is also going to be working with First Nations, making sure that there's opportunities for First Nations to fully participate and engage in energy generation. When I was minister, I signed many agreements with First Nations associated with energy production, whether that was run-of-the-river projects or other types of energy opportunities in British Columbia. We're going to continue with that kind of work because we think that is one part of what we need to do to achieve economic reconciliation. But having that honest conversation, making sure that we have reliable power, making sure that as a province we're meeting our needs, we're energy self-sufficient, we're food self-sufficient, making sure that people in this province have a government that is putting them first, making sure that we have people in this province that have a government that's focused on common sense and bringing about the change that's needed in British Columbia. That goes with everything that we are talking about, with all of our policies, but energy, of course, is one of those key components. So thank you very much for coming out today. Like I say, electricity is something that we all take for granted, but we shouldn't, because quite frankly, we need a lot more of it. And last year, if last year was any example, clearly we've got a government that doesn't believe the same thing. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
We'll be doing one question with one follow-up. First, Rob Shaw with Check News.
What do you think of that? Well, I don't think any British Columbian would disagree with the
Rob, you're on the line.